listen.
3, 2, 1. Podcasts. Podcasts never change. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 90th episode of Thursdays with Moire for a very special episode about the apocalypse, the joys, the terror, and a little in between. I'm your host, Dean Taylor. Joining me tonight is my wonderful co host, Devin King, and a special guest from a strange mythical land called Nova Scotia. Arron, would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Arron Kramers. I am an artist ultimately, but I am a filmmaker, amateur graphic designer, and screenwriter, and overall writer in general. And I am looking to branch my horizons, but I'm not here to talk about myself. I'm here to talk about three amazing. Oh crap, I just spoiled it. Sorry. Three post-apocalyptic movies.
I don't think it's
Spoiler.
much of a spoiler to say that these films are amazing. I think I think if people see the roster of films we have tonight, they're all pretty good.
Yeah.
I'll just say
I
that
mean,
much.
if anybody says Turbo Kid isn't amazing, they've just gone wrong in life, man. They've just taken a wrong turn.
I have a
yeah.
feeling that this is gonna be an amazing discussion.
This will be a very fun discussion, that's for sure. And would you mind telling us why that is, Arron? Why have you selected these three films in particular?
Because the post-apocalyptic genre has always been like it's like a niche little genre piece, like from Mad Max to A Boy and His Dog, and in video games like Fallout and The Last of Us.
And Metro.
And Metro.
Stalker, which they made a video game of, which I very much want to talk about on this podcast. Because Devin, what's your favorite movie?
Oh, whatever.
No,
Or
Stalker.
this
Stalker. Come on, man! I've set it up for you. You disappointed me.
I missed the cue.
You missed the
it's one
cue.
of them.
And You're
the-
a bad
there's
boy, Devin.
No, there's no correlation between the title of that film and what I like to do in my free time, by the way, in case anyone has any of those ideas.
That's not. You know the kind of people that have to say they're not stalkers. So, just gonna put that out there. Anyways.
Well, I mean, even the title doesn't really mean like in English what I don't know. It's like a guy, like the guy lurks about, but he's not like stalking people. It's just like he. Anyway, we're not talking about that film today.
Yeah, we're talking about Children of Men, Turbo Kid, Mad Max Fury Road. One was made with pocket change, one was based off of a book, and one was based off of a popular cult franchise. First and foremost, of course, is Alfonso Cuaron's Children of Men. Spoiler alert for all of these films. If you have not seen them yet, please click on the timestamps below, skip ahead, or maybe just watch the films and come back to the episode. When you're done, we would love to have you hear our thoughts. First and foremost, Mr. Kramers, take it away.
Alright, Children of Men from 2006. Directed by Alfonso Cuaron and starring Clive Owen. And it's about Clive Owen as Theo, who must take a woman named Key to across England which is living in hell for all the women are suffering from infertility. But the girl that Theo is taking is pregnant. The first woman pregnant.
In over 18 years.
Now you know what's at stake. Hot damn. And why is that important, Arron?
Because... Oh no, I lost my train of thought. But
I thought you were just gonna end it there.
Should have just paused for dramatic effect.
I mean,
focus on defense.
Dramatic.
wait.
Pause!
No, I didn't forget what I was gonna say. I'm keeping you in Shit, what's the rest of that word?
I'm sorry, Arron. Go on. I ruined it for you.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Oh yeah, well I think
that was it.
Patient.
Sorry.
Okay. So yes, this movie here is important. Like, oh, where do I begin? Maybe the groundbreaking
Beginning.
cinematography?
Mm-hmm. My boy, Manuel Lubezki.
Like,
cinematographer of such hits as Cat in the Hat, The Terminal, many classics. Good shit.
but he also did Birdman and Gravity and
Yeah, I guess
The
those
Revenant.
Didn't he also do the fourth Harry Potter?
two.
Am I
The
mistaken?
third Harry Potter, Prisoner of
Oh,
Azkaban,
the
which
third
was
Harry Potter.
also
My bad.
directed by Alfonso Cuaron, a director who is so infamous for dark subject matter that several producers had to call him and say, "Hey, tone it down a little bit, buddy, for Prisoner of Azkaban." And it still ended up being the darkest, most mature, and arguably best Harry Potter movie. And this film is no different. Usually, when a film is written by 6 people, that's a major red flag. But I don't know if it's just because it was based off a book or the directing is just so strong and atmospheric. This film just somehow comes together so well. And watching it
Yeah,
again, it's just
it
aged
honestly
beautifully.
shocked me seeing. It honestly shocked me that such people were behind writing, because normally, when something is written by committee, um, it tends to just get very overgeneral and sterilized, and it just loses any kind of singular essence of an emotional tone. But this absolutely carries it through. Um, like from the opening shots, you just get this immediate kind of cut in. You hear this overlapping dialogue of news reports talking about, the state of the world and how no one's been fertile in over 18 years, and then the youngest child who became a minor celebrity because of the fact that he is the last child was murdered by a fan. And you just see this like shocked room full of people in this cafe, and then the camera tracks out and follows our main character. An explosion happens, then bam, there's the title. Like, it's such a effective cold open for a movie, and
Yeah.
it just throws you kind of right into the state of things as they were.
There's an important detail you're missing. Everyone is watching except for Theo. Theo is the only one who still goes to the counter, grabs coffee, ignores what's going on, and that's unfortunately what saves him too. So right away we perfectly understand the character's mindset, which is crucial for an opening scene to do for a part of the hero's journey that's called, if I'm not mistaken, like the hero's world or the old world or something along those lines, where we get a depiction of how the protagonist sees the world and why they encompass themselves in that, because
Yeah,
it's not necessarily the perspective that his naivety and his nihilism saved him from the explosion. It's that he sees it that way. It's just like these people just care too much about a world that's destroying itself. If I just move on, then surely I'm going to be okay. And until later in the story, he has no reason to believe otherwise. It's perfect visual depiction of putting us in that character's mindset. And really, like, it's hard to blame him with this kind of universe. Like, a lot of, like, nihilistic stories, nihilistic characters, it's just mostly done for comedic value, or it's never really properly fleshed out until later into a series or a movie. But here, like, from the get-go, it's really hard to blame him for having such a nihilistic mindset, because, how else could you feel in a world like this? And it's very compelling from that perspective.
absolutely. I think it throws you right into the world that's established, and it does with very little. I mean, there's lots of exposition from like a news report, which is a very classic cliche way of dumping exposition in a way that feels natural, but it's right in the setting. It feels like
Mm-hmm.
everybody that's in the world that we see, they don't have it. They don't feel the need to explain this stuff to us. It all comes over the news, and yeah, it just throws you right into how the state of the world is right now. And I love the visual language that's in this film. I mean, there's a series of long takes. And, long takes are not easy to orchestrate, but
Yeah,
they're easy to critique because they're seen as like this, you know, something that directors kind of do just to kind of compete with each other, to jerk off like their abilities and whatnot. But I think it's used very effectively in the storytelling here. Like the series of long takes that they have that are handheld really ground you in the world that this film is creating. And
absolutely.
I think they're very grounded in person, and purposeful in telling the story in as efficient a way as possible.
Yeah, it's the narrative purpose that helps the cinematography stand out. I think that's what a lot of copycats don't really understand. They just think like, oh, it's all technical, it's all impressive. Like you just gotta have the know-how, but the know-how doesn't mean anything if there's no heart behind it. That's what movies like Candyman and arguably The Fast of Night do, where they have these long takes, but it just feels soulless. It just feels corporate, like a robot executing a program. There's no heart behind it like it is in these movies and other films that kind of structured those long takes in the first place.
I would disagree with you on The Vast of Night, but that was like a lower budget kind of indie film, and
yeah,
they do have some takes that kind of fit, but I think it absolutely works for that film. I'm not going to get into spoilers, but go watch The Vast of Night if you haven't seen it.
It is a good movie. I do recommend it overall. But back to Children of Men real quick. I think a very underrated use of a long take in this movie is just a scene when Theo and Key, not particularly subtle, but we'll get into that later, when Theo and Key meet Michael Caine's character for the first time, and Theo is just listening to Michael Caine explain why like his wife died, which normally would bug the crap out of me as like a lazy exposition dump, like, oh, you're just gonna tell instead of show. Great, but the way it just lingers on Clive Owen just listening in, and the fact that we see it from his perspective, and that like we're listening in just like he's listening in, is such a clever way of like dumping exposition. I really don't mind that the scene essentially is an exposition dump, because it's given like a new perspective, and the long take really helps us just seeing Clive Owen like going for a drink, almost going to join up with the others, but deciding to just listen instead and slowly go off on his own. Like the scene wouldn't be nearly as effective without that directing. I think this is a perfect example where if it wasn't for the directing and the atmosphere, I don't think the film would be nearly as good. Not to say that like the script is terrible and the story is terrible, but there's so many scenes where I'm just like, if this was shot any differently, if this was presented any differently or acted in any different way, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah, like I have a hard time imagining this story being told in not this way. Like it could have been told in a lesser way, in a more conventional sense.
Like the book.
But I do think, yeah, like I could have seen like a story with this kind of idea. I could see being done by lesser directors, and they might be fine. But I think the way that the way that how this film tells the story is just as important as the story it's telling. Because you can pick apart like details about the story it's telling. I mean, this is kind of a motif with all these films having well, except for one, when they set like a specific date of the future of this, what the future's going to be like, it gets easily kind of outdated by just the progress of time.
Yeah, for sure.
One of these movies plays it that I makes fun of that idea, which I really appreciate, and one of them very cleverly doesn't tell you a specific date at all, which I think is probably the best way to tell these kind of stories that are
Absolutely.
in the future.
Yeah.
Like to make it non-specific to a certain time and place, because that way. I remember flipping through DVDs earlier, and I forget, it was some Kevin Costner movie, but it took place in the far distant future of
Waterworld.
2013. No, it wasn't Waterworld. It was something else. I forget what it was called, but it took place in 2013, and it's from like the mid 90s, and I just found it really funny.
Yeah.
Postman?
That's it, The Postman.
Yeah, that is kind of funny when stuff like that happens. Like Blade Runner is set in the dystopian future of 2020. I mean, they were half right in fairness, but yeah, I
2019. Think, like Blade Runner, they got some things right. That
yeah. Do they say what year this takes place?
2027.
Did they mention that strictly?
Well, it says that in the marketing for sure.
Oh, it says in the marketing.
And honestly, after watching that movie and like seeing the lived-in environment, I could see our future looking like that.
Yeah, it feels so believable and lived in. It never gets silly either, which is something I appreciated. It never gets over the top or goofy like it does in like films like AI or arguably Blade Runner at times. Like it's all very grounded, very visceral. And apparently like the director insisted that he tried to keep like the technology as like ancient and believable at all times, because it highlights the fact that this world doesn't care about anything else besides its immigration issues and child problems. They're basically going backwards.
Oh yeah.
And the technology reflects that.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like, just because it takes place in the future doesn't mean the tech has to be that much better. The fact that it's mostly all very familiar, and there might just be, an odd little device or something that is somewhat futuristic, but doesn't,
But even
change,
that, like,
it doesn't change the landscape. And really, like, the look of this film, actually, the color palette does kind of remind me a little bit of AI, but this is definitely more grounded and gritty.
Yeah.
But really, you know, the state of despair that this world is in. I think this takes place in England, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it does.
Yep, England.
Yep.
Yeah, England. But this looks like what a lot of third world countries are going through right now, where they have unrest and political turmoil. This is exactly how they look, and this is just what would that look like if it happened in England, which yeah, that really adds to believability, is that it doesn't look very different than what we see happening in other places.
I mean, on top of that, they also filmed at like a lot of abandoned buildings and like open forests. Like apparently, I think the scene where they're recovering from Michael Caine dying for the first time, and he is playing in the swing set, and they encounter the deer in the building. Like that's not a set. Like that's just a building they stumbled across. I think that adds like an extra layer of, not only is it a clever way of saving budget, but it also adds an extra layer of believability to the environment, that nothing feels like constructed. Everything feels very lived in. And I always love it when a film, like when it's impossible to tell what's a set and what isn't, because really it's so hard to tell in this movie. Like I learned that Michael Caine's house was a set, and I'm like, really? Like that feels like some guy's house. Like I know people that smoke weed, and I've been to houses that they look just like Michael Caine's house, and apparently that's a set. Like that's incredible to me.
No, it's if that's purpose built for that movie, they did a good job. It looks like a cozy, awesome little cottage place to be in. I'd love to live there.
Also, best pro weed propaganda since Walk Hard. I have that in my review.
No, 100%. I think it's really good. It's and the fact that they were boasting about how the government provides suicide kits, but they still keep weed illegal.
Yeah, I know. Again, it shows like how backwards their priorities are, which that's kind of a little dated, that whole thing. Like watching that now, it's like, yeah, nobody really gives a shit about legalizing weed. But at the time, it's kind of like, wow, like the government makes such a big deal about weed. It seems weird not to do that. But nowadays, it's just like, yeah, the Canadian government doesn't give a shit. But that's it. Like that's the only aspect that feels like maybe a little dated. Nothing else about this film or the story feels dated remotely. Otherwise.
No, like it really holds up well in a terrifying way, actually. Like we could see something like this happening if something like that were to happen. I mean, it's all about human biology. It is a mystery. We don't know why humans had suddenly become infertile, and why this miracle child suddenly gets born again. There is something compelling about that. I feel like there's some higher religious elements to this, perhaps, that it covers, but there's so much that happens in this film. I love how the background and the foreground are just as important as each other. There's no wasted imagery in this film, and that's why I think all those long takes thing. Like there was a great video essay done, I believe, by the Nerd Writer, if I'm not mistaken, where he says don't ignore the background. That's because the layers of action that are happening in the background and foreground are just as important as each other in telling the story. And you can watch this film again and again and see something new in it, which I think is a great, that's a great showcase of filmmaking right there.
Absolutely. But on top of the filmmaking, like the performances too, like this has like one of the best casts like I've seen for a movie, and they're all used to the best degree. And this movie shows that Clive Owen can be a good actor. I am so sick of him being casted as these shitty, bland, generic, one-note action heroes in every single goddamn movie around this time, because this movie proves that this guy can act. I am so sick of that kind of typecasting ruining actors' careers. Like, this movie shows that this guy is an excellent actor. And it just pisses me off this career never launched after this movie like it should have. You should have been nominated for an Oscar. Sue me.
No, honestly, I thought he did a terrific job in this. Like, yeah.
And if
shame we don't see him in more roles kind of like this.
Exactly. Like, I wish he could spread his wings a little bit more. But I think he's an actor, arguably like Chris Pratt or arguably like Sam Worthington, where like they have some great like indie projects on their belt, but they're just ruined by the same typecasting over and over and over again, that they just eventually become a joke and people get sick of them. I think that's such a shame, because these actors do have talent. They just need an opportunity to spread their wings more often.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like, there might be an element of them just wanting a steady paycheck sometimes.
I
do
get
think
that too, but it's such a shame.
No, I think it's great when people like Adam Sandler even break out of their normal typecast roles and do something different, like the 2 times he did with Uncut Gems and Uncut Gems and Punch Drunk Love. I think those are
you could argue 3 times with the Noah Baumbach film he did. You could argue that as well.
Or Rain on Me, I guess, was that other one. But anyway.
Yeah. Excellent
it's great to see.
All around.
It's great to see people do something different than their norm.
Exactly. And excellent performances all around. Julianne Moore is great. Chodo Ojifor is great. It was I'm like, hey, he played 2 bad guys around this time, just back to back. Like, I saw Serenity, then I saw this film, and I'm just like, oh, hey, he's going to be the bad guy in this. But honestly, I wouldn't have guessed he wouldn't have been the bad guy otherwise, but it's just kind of funny when you see that kind of typecast. You're just like, oh, hey, he usually plays the bad guy. Charlie Hunnam is in this movie? I barely even recognize him. My mom's like, that's the Sons of Anarchy guy. I'm like, what?
Wow.
I'm sorry?
I didn't know. We already mentioned Michael Caine earlier. I mean,
yeah,
Michael Caine's just a legend. He's been in everything. But I love the fact that he based his performance on John Lennon in this. John Legend. Which totally makes sense, right?
Yeah.
100%. Cocaine.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say like John Legend. I'm like, oh, I don't remember Michael Caine doing blackface, but all right.
No, I misspoke. I mean, first of all, John Legend. I don't know if that was his given name or if that was a stage name, but he's piggybacking off of someone else with a name like that. Just it's easy to mispronounce, right?
100%.
If that's the case, if that was his God-given name, then all right, fine. But yeah.
Just pointing that out there. Yeah, it's excellent.
It's funny.
I just want to bring it back real quick. The performances are excellent. The cinematography is great. Music's great. I don't know how much of the music is composed or it's just classical music, but all of the choices here fit every scene perfectly. And hey, Devin, Crimson King's in the soundtrack.
I love the needle drop of King Crimson in the court of the
Not
Crimson
shocked
King.
at all.
That was they're King Crimson. Anybody that pays the rights to get King Crimson in their movie deserves some credit. That's one of the few reasons I like Buffalo '66. They have King Crimson and yes in the soundtrack.
Two ways into your heart.
I'll complain about that movie another day. But
hey, you've got a big dick, director of the movie. I'm just gonna randomly point out you've got a big dick. Anyways, come on, we're going off topic here. Children of Men. It's just one of those.
I was just reading another thing from Alfonso Cuaron in terms of the way he shot this. And I think this is a very smart move. He said that he wanted to shoot this movie like Battle of Algiers rather than Blade Runner to make it more of a documentary kind of feel. And I absolutely think that direction absolutely works. I don't know if you guys have seen Battle of Algiers, but that's a film we should talk about at some point in the show. I need to rewatch that one.
Add it to my list.
Oh yeah, great movie.
Yeah, and talking about like the long takes real quick. There's a long take near the end where it's like they have tanks and exploding like debris and so many extras running around and screaming, and like there isn't a second where I'm just like, okay, like that shot looks stitched together, or okay, that extra isn't acting well, or okay, like this prop didn't explode when it should have. There isn't a single second where I'm distracted by anything. There isn't a single detail that's out of place. There isn't like a single prop that isn't timed at just the right moment. There isn't a single extra that's unconvincing. I can't imagine the kind of work that would go into making these shots looks not only go on for so long, but feel so natural and organic in the process. And there is bits of CGI too, but honestly, if you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have noticed. Like, apparently, like, the golf ball and the curse scene is CGI, but I wouldn't have noticed. Apparently, like, a few of the tank shell rounds or CGI, but again, I wouldn't have noticed that unless people told me. It shows that CGI can be done well if it's in the background. It shouldn't be the core of the image. It should be used to boost the image, if anything.
I think the biggest effect shot in this by far was the baby being born, because they show like a baby being born in pretty, you know, gruesome detail. Although it's lit in such a way where it's just backlit by a single lantern, and it's very tastefully done. It's a very intense scene.
Yeah,
But that
very
baby is
believable.
fully CGI, and
Yeah.
unless you like blow this up on like a 4K TV and you have like the 4K Blu-ray kind of up-res it's hard to tell that that's CGI. Like I rewatched an HD version of this on like a moderate TV, and maybe it was just how the TV was set where it looked a little extra dark. But you know, if you're not looking too closely, that baby looks photo real.
Yeah, I know. Like you could barely even notice it. It's just the way they shot it and composed it with the rest of the imagery and the
No, like
atmosphere. It's like a magic show, almost. But the ending. So I've heard some people say
it's
that the ending.
you know, and that
Yeah, go on.
makes sense for Pratt didn't have. No, that I was gonna wrap up the last point, but go on. Go ahead.
Sorry. Let's talk about the ending because I heard a few bits of controversy that the ending, how should I put this, gave misery blue balls, as a zero punctuation game critic would put it, where it didn't feel earned and like they pulled a happy ending out of their ass. Let's tell them why they're wrong. What you guys have to say about that?
I'd say it's a realistic ending, because with the birth of the new baby, that should be a sign that all children will be born again. So it is a happy ending that it's earned.
Yeah, absolutely.
A hopeful ending.
Yeah, it feels organic because like if you were a military guy who shot like the only living child in this world, that's going to have huge ramifications. So I mean, I'd probably be just like him even if I had the most narrow-minded nihilistic viewpoint. I'd just be like cease fire. And of course, like the message that like through this ultimate chaos, something beautiful can kind of like unite the world for just a brief moment. And that's where kind of like the religious subtext you mentioned earlier, Devin. Go on.
I think you skipped over probably the best sequence in the whole film, and I think this is the sequence that, I don't know, really ties it all together. And it's when, after the baby was born and these people were trying to take control of the baby back because they feel like it has to, I guess, be under their protection, and they were going to kill the guy. When he goes to save her from them, and this building is getting, you know, shot up by the police and everybody. Everyone lets the baby through once they hear that the baby is crying. Everyone just stops and freezes and lets
that's
the baby
what we're
through.
talking about. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then once they're out, then they start shooting again.
Yeah.
I welled
love
up
that
when I
detail
saw
too.
that scene.
Yeah, me too. Like again, like it's nice touch of detail. I love movies where the plot doesn't just stop for the characters. Like it it feels like there's actions and consequences going around the characters that don't just stop 100% of the time. Like there's a scene in The Last of Us when like Ellie and Joel have a pretty serious conversation and his brother breaks in and it says like get your shit together, like bandits are here. I'm just like, oh, like this feels like a natural organic world. It doesn't feel like the story is just waiting for these two to finish up. And that's what adds to the believability factor of this movie tenfold. It feels like there's a world around these characters. The world isn't just stopping for the characters to have a dramatic moment.
Well, except for the baby.
Well, except for
I mean, except for the baby.
Different circumstances. The baby earned it. I mean, come on. He had to go through all that shit.
100%. I think the baby earned.
Yeah.
Everyone just getting their shit together.
To quote a few good men.
I'm glad. I'm also glad that it's like, oh, the child is born, and then they bring it up to a hilltop, the circle of life, and then and all of a sudden the world's good again. It's like, no, like everyone stopped for the baby, and that was a beautiful moment. But then they went back right to fighting as soon as they were gone,
and that's
which
to
is terrifying.
Yeah.
No, I think so. It could have been a much lesser ending if that was the ending of the movie. If they just brought the baby out and suddenly, and everyone put their guns down and they all clapped.
Yeah,
like that would have been the really cheesy ending, where them narrowly escaping and Clive Owen kind of dying while they're in this boat. I love the whole sequence of them going in the boat. this kind of it actually reminds me a little bit of Prince of Egypt a little bit. They're sending the child out from the water, except with people protecting it this time.
A little bit.
And it is somewhat
Yeah.
ambiguous, like when she gets to the when she gets to the boat, which is named Tomorrow, which that might be seen as a little on the nose, but I do think that it's fitting in this case.
Yeah.
And then it cuts off right before you see that she gets on this boat. I do think that creates a good bit of dramatic tension, and that's a good place to leave it.
It's a perfect, like, it's a satisfying ending, but it doesn't like treat you like an idiot. It leaves just enough to the imagination to kind of fill out the dots in your head, which is a very good, very tough balance to reach. And apparently, yeah, the boat CGI too. But again, I wouldn't have noticed that if somebody didn't tell me. It is remarkable. Not that being said, I'm gonna stop jerking off the movie and point out some nitpicks I have. First off, yeah, you kind of lead into it. Tomorrow, key, yeah, stuff like that's like a little bit on the nose. Stuff like that kind of drives me nuts. And Julian Moore is great in this movie, but I have to admit, Julian Moore and Clive Owen, I didn't buy it. Like, I didn't really get the sense that they had like much of a history or that they really had like any chemistry. And I get they're supposed to be kind of awkward together, but it just kind of felt flat. Like they kind of just met each other for the first time. I didn't really buy like a relationship they had together, which does, like, the cursing is great, but it does like nullify the emotional impact a little bit. Whereas like it feels like a random person's dying and that I should maybe care about this a little more than I do. Like there's emotional beats that hit a lot better in this film than that scene does. It's technically perfect, but I don't know, like I don't feel like it quite earned the emotions it was going for outside of like the overall shock factor of what was happening. Like that was a little bit disappointing to me. Like I felt more for other character deaths for sure. And I felt like the first act of the movie had a little too much exposition, which maybe would have worked better in the book, but in the context of the movie, it's kind of like, okay, there's so much great like subtle world building and atmosphere building, and you're just sitting in a room talking. Like there's a scene where it's like, I don't really do much for politics. That's all you used to do. And I'm like, it would have been better if you showed that or implied that instead of just going over his whole background. And if those scenes were shot in a different way, that they may have.
It's like they're talking about stuff that they already know, which is
exactly.
like a classic trope to get us up to speed with things. But I mean, for the most part, I found it worked. I did find I forgot that she died in the car. Like it had been that long since I watched this movie, and I did still find that scene shocking. Where the technical camera work wasn't like the forefront of it. It definitely showcased the scene very well, and it was all done very purposefully, and it's all very impressive. But I think it works ultimately for the scene. But you mentioned comparing this to the book, that they go into more details. There is one detail that has changed from the book that I was just reading. I haven't read the book myself, but I am very curious what you guys think of this. Apparently, in the movie, the infertility crisis is a result of the women being infertile, but in the original book, it's because men weren't producing sperm. So that's like a change that they had made for the movie, and I'm wondering, what do we think of that change? Does that make sense, or
I don't think it makes
arbitrary?
It's pretty arbitrary. Like I don't think it makes that much of a difference either way because it's kind of like two sides of the same coin. It's a similar issue, but it's the genders changed. Like I don't think it makes that much of a difference, honestly.
No,
it's pretty superficial.
I'm wondering what the motivation was behind the change. Like, is there a symbolic difference?
Yeah, I think they might be going for a symbolic difference. They might be. You said there's a lot of like religious allegories. There's like clear allusions to what was it, like the story of like the first woman to give birth. It's not Adam and Eve. There's like allusions to Adam and Eve and stuff like that. They might be going for like the Virgin Mary in a way, like the Virgin Mary 5, where it's like they literally can't reproduce, so they had this miracle.
That was a thing that they joked about. Like that was a thing that she joked about when she said she was a virgin, and then and when he said really, he just starts laughing at him like, yeah, that'd be wild though, wouldn't it? Like, and then the way she was also standing when she was showing herself being pregnant for the first time, she's like standing around these kind of cows. Like the way she's standing kind of reminded me of that painting of Venus.
Yeah.
I almost put painting and Venus together and said something else.
That's a pretty that was a pretty clear illusion. I think that may have been why they made that change to just tie into that religious symbolism that this child is like these women can't give birth, so this child is given on as a miracle, which was basically how the story of the Virgin Mary run along. It's like no woman, like no women or men could reproduce up until that point, and this birth was a miracle. So I think that might be why they made the change. Sorry, go on, Aaron.
I was gonna say, like, a lot of shots in this movie, like, are seen like they're ripped straight from a painting. Like when Theo and Key and the gypsy lady run out, like you see the mother like cradling her son's corpse, and it's like that one painting
Yeah, there's allusion to Pink Floyd, the cover of the Pink Floyd Animals with like the pig flowing in the distance and the silos off in the distance. I thought that was like a clever reference.
There's a lot of overt art references in this.
But it never feels pretentious. It never feels annoying. Like it's on the surface of the story. They showed
the statue of David that had like a broken leg that they had to fix. There's also that giant painting from Pablo Picasso, which I think depicts a lot of deaths that happened during World War II, and it's one of his few like black and white, paintings that he did. I forget the significance of it entirely, but like they're all there just as part of the landscape.
Yeah, but it never feels annoying. Like it all feels earned and tangible of the atmosphere. Like even like the statue of David even says it's like you should have seen how what happened to the other statue, just implying that these statues were destroyed. But if more of the exposition was like that, just like these subtle references to different points of time and less clunky like in the beginning, I think the film would have worked a little better. But like as it stands, those are surprisingly pretty small flaws for all of the film's accomplishments, and the atmosphere and the tension and the believability of the world. Like it's some of the best world building I've ever seen in a movie, and I can't stress that enough. It would have been much, much lesser of a film without the filmmaking bravura and just all the atmospheric touches in the world building. It really just draws the film together and makes it a compelling experience. And it's not boring. Like this film is almost like it's almost 2.5 hours long, and it just flies by. It is so incredibly well paced and exciting and interesting, which is kind of rare to see for a post-apocalyptic film, especially nowadays in like the A24 written era. And look, I love me some slow burn, but it's kind of nice to see a director that wants to make a film that's depressing and sour, but doesn't do that, like doesn't take the audience's excitement and engagement away in the process. So it's kind of refreshing.
I think it's actually ultimately very hopeful. Like it's a very bleak future they live in.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it is about hope and the perseverance of people in these kind of hard times, right? And I do think that it's very beautiful to showcase that. Like this is a very watchable film. Like this is a film that I had rewatched actually like quite a few times over the years. Like every so often, whenever the mood strikes me. But I could watch this with like the rest of my family, and it's not so dark, it's not so bleak that it pulls you out of it, or like offends you too much. But it is a very beautiful, poignantly created work of art that people of different age groups can appreciate, I think.
Yeah, and I think even the idea behind Clive Owen's arc is just optimism in the face of nihilism. It's very simple, but like very well handled and developed to the point where that a similar arc and similar idea of characterization has been like referenced heavily, I'd argue to a good degree, in stories like The Last of Us or Logan, or and the influence this story has had and this movie has had is like catastrophic. Like it's almost on the level of Alien or almost on the level of RoboCop or Star Wars, with just how influential this story has been to so many different tales of science fiction. Like, I don't know if we could have gotten a story like Logan without this movie. I don't know if we could have gotten The Last of Us. It's just a great work of art.
I think this film definitely opened the doors for this type of storytelling that we've seen from here on in. But it feels kind of ahead of its time in a weird sense.
It's not dated, even remotely. Like, only the marijuana part's a little bit dated. But that's about it.
Well, that's just because we live in Canada, where it's been legalized nationwide. In the U.S. and other places, it's still very much stigmatized and
that's
illegal.
true.
I think
screw you, conservatives.
Yeah,
for
screw
not liking Wayne.
screw you goddamn capitalists. I hope you're listening to this, Steven. Fuck you.
Yeah, you fascist pigs.
Yeah,
Once
fascist
we're
pigs.
done this, once
Pull
we're
my
done this,
finger.
Sorry, Aaron.
once we're done this podcast, we're gonna smoke some weed just to spite our capitalist.
All right, pause the
enemies.
podcast. I'm going. All right.
Yeah.
What would we rate this? All right, you maple syrup loving commies. What are we gonna rate Children of Men?
8. Solid. It's
8.
a solid movie.
I'm gonna go higher. I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. Love it.
Nice.
Gets better every time I watch it. There's some problems with exposition, the writing, but it's so small in the grand scheme of things. And I don't know if I could say that about every film that has similar issues like it. It's just a perfect example of being greater than the sum of your parts. Mr. Kramers.
I would give this a 10 out of 10, as I would say that this is Alfonso Cuaron's magnum opus.
Yeah, he should have won for this
might
instead of
just
Gravity.
be my masterpiece.
Yeah, he should have won for this instead of Gravity. Fuck you, Oscars. Fuck you, Academy. Going from one masterpiece to an even greater masterpiece made with pocket change, it's Turbo Kid. So, this film was made with a $40,000 budget. It was made from the wonderful nation of Canada, and it stars Sam Fisher. It is... What the fuck is it about? People have compared it to Mad Max and the Apocalypse, but I kind of view it as more of a kind of a cute coming-of-age story with a weird exploitation, 80s exploitation, hyper-violent twist to it. And it's a movie, that's for sure. So what is it about? Okay.
It's certainly a movie. I want to correct you on one thing. It's actually a Canadian-New Zealand co-production.
That's right. My apologies. There were 5 billion production companies. I couldn't keep them all. I apologize.
Yeah.
We
one of
have
those
Canuck
movies.
commies and Kiwis in this one.
Yeah, there you go. The dynamic duo. So this film is about Mega Man, whose parents were murdered by Sam Fisher. So he grew up on his own. He collects all of these wonderful 80s objects, and the way they used color grade to represent that, I think, was like a really clever choice, but we'll get into that. He comes across Cortana, who he doesn't know is a robot at first, but spoiler alert, she turns out to be a robot who is like kind of like the most wholesome person, and gets him to open up about his childhood enthusiasm and look at life in a different way. And they both teach each other about different things. But while this is happening, Crocodile Dundee gets wrapped up in a plot with Michael Ironside, a discount Road Warrior villain, and they all fight at the end of the movie. And yeah, this movie, if there's one word I would describe it, it's cute. It's a very cute, very sweet, very wholesome movie. And the big part about what saves it for me is that there isn't an ounce of cynicism in there. Like, there's attempts to be funny, but it's never like, oh, hey, we're bad on purpose kind of bullshit, like with Kung Fury or arguably Manborg. It's all very purposeful, very... It tries to be its own thing, and it says, fuck you if you don't like it. And I respect that. I respect having a vision. I respect genuinely trying to have some good cinematography and a compelling relationship. So compelling that after test audiences watched the movie, they actually added scenes with the main character and what's the girl's name again? I'm sorry, I'm terrible. Sorry?
Apple. And
Apple.
The movie the movie we're talking about is Turbo Kid.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I should have opened with that. Turbo Kid. I think I opened with that. Yeah, their relationship carries this movie. I was not expecting like such a sweet, wholesome, compatible relationship. Like there's a scene where she wakes him up and he's like, "Wake up, sleepyhead," and then he drags her to another place and she wakes up and he's like, "Wake up, sleepyhead," and I was like, I felt like I needed to squeeze, do some weights because my masculinity was seeping away because that was adorable. I actually thought I was the most bored during the action. Honestly, which was not what I was expecting from this film at all.
Okay, yeah, the action, I have to say, the biggest stripe about this is it is a very indie budget movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they really had a stunt coordinator.
No.
This looks like something I shot. I'll say it was that bad in terms of the action.
Yeah.
Although, it made up in tenfold with the gore effects. The gore effects were super cheesy, super over the top. They had literally gallons and buckets of blood.
Yeah.
And it was just a delight to see that. Like, it's very cheesy, it's very over the top, it's not realistic, it's just hilariously oversaturated.
The part where the guy got like somebody's dead body over his head, and that part of the dead body got covered in another dead body. That dead body got covered in another dead body. I actually laughed out loud.
It's so absurd that I forget the lack of stunt coordination and the lack of good action coverage.
It's so poorly edited.
Over the top, ridiculous gore effects. Like, it was fun to see that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what drags the film down for me. Like, and I don't even think you necessarily need a good budget to have good like action scenes, because the Raid Redemption movies like that were made with pocket change. Like, that movie was shot at the director's apartment. It was so cheap, but they had cinematographers and stunt coordinators that knew what they were doing. And I just don't think the directors like knew what they were doing when shooting the action. It does that thing I hate where people just wait their turn to fight, and it just makes the action feel very stilted and very awkward.
Yeah, I think those scenes were kind of rushed. They didn't quite know what to do with them.
I'm kind of with you, but there's parts about the action I do like. Like you said, like the gore is really fun. Storyboard-wise, there's like some fun ideas for the action, and I like how the main character gets his ass kicked at first, and he kind of like works up to being the hero. I like how they didn't just get plot armor.
I do like how he's not like perfect. It's like he is a kid basically, and he gets hurt by these adults who are like fighting him. So I do like that they balance that out. This reminds me very much of Psycho Goreman to an extent. Like, it's very much this 80s, 90s, nostalgia. This is basically like a kids movie made by kids in the 80s who just grew up and
made by Paul Verhoeven
for other basically.
Yeah.
But
that's
no, like
Canadian.
I remember when this came out. I was like really into Kung Fury when that movie dropped. Technically a short film. And people recommended me Turbo Kid as well. And I had started watching it, but I don't think I finished it back then. This is the first time I had finished it. And yeah, there's a lot of fun parts in it. It's definitely not a perfect movie. It didn't hold my attention throughout the whole thing. Or maybe just the stream I had was kind of crap. But it's still a fun movie. And I'd still say it was a good time. It's very much, indebted in that 80s nostalgia. But it feels very... I don't know. If it feels very has a heart to it, I'll say that.
Yeah, it feels very genuine. Like, it doesn't feel cynical. It doesn't even like the 80s nostalgia didn't bug me too much, because they at least put it with narrative context, where it's like it's this child like literally discovering these objects he's never seen before. So it's like, okay, like you can gawk at like cool 80s objects, and Apple is the same way, and I shocked her character was never annoying. Like, it never got to a point where I was just rolling my eyes when she showed up. Like, she always comes at just the right moments. She's always... The actress is just having a complete ball, like, playing the character. Like, when he made the gnome stick, and she's like, oh my god! Like, this is, like, the best thing ever! And it's like, yeah, it's kind of cute.
I like the references, like, the gnome stick is, like, boomstick.
Yeah, I know, but she owns it. She owns it.
If you notice the breakfast cereal, it's Soleil Vert.
Yeah, that was cute.
It is Soylent Green en français. I thought that was really funny.
There's some funny jokes in this movie. I'll give it that.
I love how this takes place in the distant future of 1997.
Yeah.
Which felt like I like that joke. It shows how dated some of these like old dystopian movies can get.
Yeah, it's very tongue-in-cheek, but there's never a point where it's just like, let's make fun of how bad we are, which, again, I can't stress enough how much that saves the movie for me. It's just a genuine attempt at this cute, sweet movie with a low budget, and I like that. I appreciate that a lot. And the cinematography outside the action scenes is actually pretty good. Like, I love the color grading choice to highlight, like, the objects and Apple's costume and like important places of interest outside of like the gray washed out colors of the West of the Wasteland and the evil characters. I thought that was like a really clever like visual aesthetic of showing the main characters like kind of childlike personality. Like I like it when color grading tells a story like that. And I wasn't expecting some genuinely great shots. Like, I love the wide shot of the discount Mad Max villain like looking over the poisonous fog. Like, I love the shot of like some of the bike shots. Like, yeah, the bike choreography sucks, but when they're just like calmly riding the bikes and it does like the behind the over the shoulder perspective shots, it's like that looks good. Like they got like a good cinematographer to work on this, and the soundtrack is so good. Best part of the movie. And again, it's not like a cheap, get on the 80s nostalgia bandwagon. It's like the soundtrack actually elevates some of the scenes. It actually has like a mood and an atmosphere. Like it feels like people tried. It didn't feel like they put in the bare minimum effort to cash in on a niche.
No, I think the way they shot and covered this was very good for considering the budget that it had. There were some like digital effects and composites that were pretty obvious.
That looked like
but
shit.
Considering,
but besides that,
considering the budget that they had, it was fine. It was serviceable. It reminded me very much of Manborg, but that's on even or tighter budget. I really liked that movie solely because the guy made it for like less than $1,000 in his mom's garage with costumes that were literally made out of garbage and hot glue.
But that film is, I don't know. I think if that film owned it more, like this movie does, I would have liked it so much more. But it feels so like cynical and so like, oh, let's just poke fun at ourselves.
This feels like a better realized version of that kind of concept. Absolutely, for sure. Like he got out of his mom's garage and he managed to go outside. And,
literally, yeah.
That's what it feels like. And these are different people behind these. I like the three people behind this. I can't remember how to pronounce their names, but together they play the Roadkill. What was it?
Superstars.
Yeah, Roadkill Superstars. I like that they it's like these three directors. Two of them are brothers, and then this one other guy. They all have French names that I'm gonna mispronounce. So they gave themselves, a team name, which is pretty cool.
Nice. Well, what do you think, Aaron? You've been pretty quiet so far.
I've been trying to talk, but
oh, mom.
Oh yeah.
Hi, Poppy.
But anyways, I really liked Turbo Kid and Apple's chemistry. Like watching them on screen, like with the music playing, just like brings a smile to my face.
I'm with you.
And I have to disagree with you on the action set pieces. I think it fits perfectly with the aesthetic that they're going for here. If you watch a lot of like those 80s, 70s like exploitation movies from like Italy or whatever, where like the way that they shot it is like you mentioned, like, but the gore is like juxtaposed with the cutesy tone, like adds like they complement each other. Like they're not trying to be like edgy. Like it's like you mentioned, it's heart. Like that's Canadian genre cinema at its core, is like violent, over the top movies, nihilistic or not, but have heart at the center.
Nice.
Really, a tricky tone to pull off too, and I think that they
nailed it.
They managed to accomplish it very well here. Like it's very wholesome, it's heartwarming, but it's also gory as hell. It kind of hits on all cylinders.
And I'd argue even that kind of fits the tone of the movie. Like it's a childlike perspective on this awful world. So yeah, the gore seems extreme, but it's also like really goofy and silly. It's like maybe that's how this kid like sees awful events like that, just like so over the top and so goofy, like he has to play it off like it's something silly. Like even that like kind of fits the childlike perspective.
And we got a cameo from the director of Hobo with a Shotgun.
Really?
Who executive produced? Yeah, he was the cook at the Zeus's place.
Oh,
no way.
No shit.
That's really fun. I mean, the Canadian film business world is a very small world. I mean,
it's a great world too.
Oh yeah, it's really cool, and it's cool seeing Michael Ironside in these movies still.
It's good to see him still have a career after they replaced him in Splinter Cell. Not gonna go over that, and the fact that they aren't making a fucking Splinter Cell game already. But put a pin in that for now. And it's really fun seeing him play like an over-the-top bad guy. And none of the performances are particularly great, except for arguably Apple's. But it just looks like they're having so much fun that you can't really be mad at it. It's just like you're trying. You're just it all feels very loose. It feels like a fun student film, so it's hard to really be mad at like any of the faults. I think the only major issue I have besides the action scenes is that the film felt kind of rushed to meet like the 90-minute deadline. Like after Apple gets caught, I feel like that should have been played out a little bit longer. Like it should have been like she got caught and then Discount Mega Man immediately finds her. Like it's like I feel like there should have been like a couple scenes of her being like, "Oh, what's going on? What's happening?" And like Apple going through it. It just felt really rushed. It's like we skipped Act 2 and just went right to the midpoint, and then we skipped from the midpoint and went right to the climax. Like it felt a little bit choppy there, but like again, it's really hard to be mad at a film like this. It's all just very wholesome and adorable and well intentioned. Like there's a shot where the two of them are kissing with an umbrella while blood is literally pouring all over them. And I literally say out loud, "That's disgusting. I love it." That's repugnant, but it's cute.
I was just reading a little bit about the production here, but this was basically all filmed in Quebec. And what was interesting is that like the story was supposed to be a desert wasteland, right? But the problem is, like it happens in Quebec and Ontario, it rained a lot, so they ended up adding acid rain to the script, and then they tinted it green as well to create those kind of puddles or to make it look like it's radioactive. So I like how they did that like kind of workaround with the filming, trying to make what nature was giving them work for the movie.
I even felt like the world building was pretty well done. Like I like how they never explicitly say it's a world without power. It's just kind of implied by the fact that they have to use bikes to power things up, and the fact that robots are a rare commodity, and everybody's like scared of robots. But outside of Michael Ironside, they never really say why. And it's just like there's nice like subtle world building. It's like, how does Turbo Kid have better world building than the Total Recall remake or Passengers or any big budget Hollywood schlock? Like again, it just shows that this was a lot of people say that this is a meme movie, and I don't know about that. It's far from perfect.
Bullshit.
It's incredibly flawed, but it's made from passion. People tried making this movie, you know. They didn't just do the bare minimum to get memes.
There was another thing that you mentioned earlier that you said that the score and the cinematography were like two of the highlights for you. Interesting thing is they were both done by the same guy.
Yeah, which is insane.
Jean-Philippe Bernier, which is yeah, it's crazy. It sounds like me actually. I film stuff and also make music. I'm not gonna plug it here, but it is an interesting combination that you see in a movie like this, that someone does the score and the cinematography.
Yeah, what a talent. And even the ending was like, wow, like that actually got me. Like I actually like loved seeing these two together, and it's also kind of a clever like subversion of expectations, because we see Apple come back like in her new body, so we just think, oh, that was just a fake out death. She's clearly back for real. And then she powers down. It's like, damn, like that builds up your expectations and kind of subverts them in a clever way. Like, and that kind of like adds to the emotion of the scene. I'm like, wow, like this cheap $40,000 schlock like actually got like an emotional response on me. And I'd like to point out that this movie is getting a sequel for some reason, and if Apple's not in the next movie, I'm not watching it. And if Apple is in the next movie, that ruins the continuity and a powerful emotional moment of this movie, and I'm not watching it.
So here's another question. What if Apple was funding the movie? Like it was Apple Films making this?
Then I wouldn't watch it, because then I would give Apple money to watch it. Aaron, go on.
But like what? So then like you wouldn't want to watch Turbo Kid 2 if neither Apple is in it nor she won't be in it?
No, well, because the thing is, if she is in the second movie, that completely redacts like the best like emotional gut punch of this movie. And if she isn't in it, like arguably my favorite part of the movie isn't in it anymore. And like I said, like outside of the relationship, the film wasn't entirely engaging me, so I don't think it would work nearly as well without her.
Well, going off topic, like T is for Turbo Kid was based on a short film, T is for Turbo, that was meant as a submission for the T segment in Aunt Timpson's horror anthology, The ABCs of Death.
Really?
Though wasn't selected, Timpson was impressed and approached the filmmakers to expand their idea into a feature. And in case you're wondering what was the winner of the T segment, it was Lee Hardcastle's T is for Toilet.
Ah! Boo!
Man, I've seen some of Lee Hardcastle's stuff, and it's pretty disturbing. So I think that
I love Lee Hardcastle.
I think that absolutely fits for the ABCs of death.
Yeah, it fits that tone a lot better. Whereas this is kind of going for like a sick but sweet vibe, like early James Gunn or.
It's a very sickly sweet thing. I'll say that.
Couldn't agree more. Parts of it are downright terrible. It's cheesy, it's schlocky, it's rushed, but I still loved it.
Would you show this to kids? Is my question.
No.
I think it's meant for people who are children at heart and specifically grew up in like the 80s
That's more
and
so
90s.
it's for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't show it the actual kids. This is more so to find your it's for me. This is kind of a movie about finding your inner child. I feel like if you watch it as a kid, you'd wonder like what all the blood and guts are for, and you're just like, wait, no.
Well, I think they'll get some bad ideas.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if I put this guy on a bike, cool stringy things will fall out.
Yeah.
And
reminds me a lot of the superheroes that. This reminds me a lot of the superheroes that I used to draw in public school. Like I drew this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I drew like this superhero named Stick Boy because he was just a stick figure with like a green cape and has a sword, fighting like bad guys, and the teachers thought that I was drawing like some guy with a knife killing people.
Oh no.
Aww.
I hate being misunderstood, but we're not here. We're not here to talk about my woes. We're here to talk about Turbo Kid.
Nice.
Which it's funny because I remember watching RoboCop when I was 8. So I don't know how much worse this movie is than that.
I love it.
I like it.
Oh, that's it. Sorry.
Yep.
I think they're both on par in terms of brutality. Like I've seen a lot of splatter movies.
Oh yeah, but I at least like the gore effects are not that convincing, but they're just fun and over the top.
They lean into it.
Yeah. I love the shot at the end where like he and Apple are like under this umbrella.
Yeah.
And it's just raining blood continuously.
I know. I mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a funny, sweet moment.
It's disgusting. I love it.
And somehow he ripped a guy in half with an umbrella.
Yeah, that was great. And the bike gag was really funny. Like the stringy organs like getting caught on the bike. It's like it's disgusting, but it's hilarious at the same time.
It was happening to a dollar store George Stroumboulopoulos.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, discount George Stroumboulopoulos. Good shit. What are we gonna rate Turbo Kid out of 10?
I think you know what I'm gonna rate it. Ian.
Oh, I think you know what I'm gonna rate it. Let's say it at the same time. All right, 3, 2, 1. 6.9. Yeah, it's 6.9 out of 10. I was gonna give it 6.5, but it's too sweet and too wholesome and too adorable to be mad at it for very long. So you know what? It's 6.9 out of 10. I enjoyed it a lot. I think I'll even watch it again and get the Blu-ray.
I'm giving it an 8 out of 10.
Ooh, higher than your Letterboxd score.
Well, I just rewatched it again after like
fair point.
What? 2 years, so like plus give some love to like Canadian genre cinema.
Yes.
We got to come up with a name of this type of like series of like genre films in Canada.
Canexploitation, yeah.
Canexploitation.
I think it does exist.
Yeah, it does exist.
I'm pretty sure. I'm looking this up. Canexploitation. I'm pretty sure I've seen this before. Hold up.
Go for it.
Yeah, it's a thing. Canexploitation. Cannibal Girls, anyone?
I thought you were gonna say Ginger Snaps, but I guess that's just outright a horror movie.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Canadian genre films Canadian genre cinema is what we'll call it. Lump it up there with Hobo with a Shotgun, Possessor, and...
I mean, one Possessor would be more of a just body horror movie.
but it's still a Canadian genre film.
Oh yeah, that's true. You got me there. It's not quite Canuxploitation.
No, like I'm just
It's spelled with an X. That's why I was getting the wrong results. Canuxploitation.
Fuck yeah.
There's an actual article for this thing. One or two of them are ones I've wanted to talk about for a while.
I mean, that's probably a Canadian website.
Oh yeah. Well, now that we've fulfilled our mandate for Canadian content,
let's go down to Australia.
Oh yeah, down to the Aussies. We went from Britain to Canada to New Zealand, now to the land down under. I'm not gonna entertain you with my butchered Australian accent.
No, come on.
From
Keep
here
going.
Out. Which is interesting because this film was actually filmed in Africa because the lands that they wanted to film in had flowers blossoming. And it's like, oh, this is too.
God damn it!
Too pretty for the world that we're trying to build here. So I don't know how to introduce this film really. Mad Max Fury Road. It's the fourth installment in the Mad Max franchise, directed by the brilliant mind of George Miller, who used to be an ER doctor, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Which lends some authenticity to some scenes that happen in this film. So this film, this follow-up of Mad Max, has been on the back burner for many years. George Miller wanted to make this way back in the 90s, after I guess the underperformance of Thunderdome, which we finally have a new channel in the Discord named after. He was wanting to follow it up with something bombastic and huge, and he wanted to do this back to the 90s, but budget wasn't quite there, and what he wanted to accomplish just wasn't quite possible at that point in time. So he decided, well, dang, I need to make money, and I want to keep doing this filmmaking thing. So he decides to make a few projects along the line. I think Witches of Wex. What was that one movie with
well, there
Jack
was
Nicholson in it?
There
was quite a few films, but notably the Babe series, Babe Pig in the City,
Kino,
was George Miller's contribution to that series, and then the Happy Feet films, which evidently he wasn't that happy to make, but he still gave it his all anyhow. Although it did get to the point that I was saying, if anyone asks me, or if I end up doing a third Happy Feet film, shoot me in the fucking forehead. Which, would be a great loss, but I'd be doing my service.
Well, Devin just incriminated himself on the podcast. Keep that in mind, folks.
Please don't send the future police at me.
No, too late. The Minority Report squad is here. Yeah, pre-crime.
I have no plans to do this at all, and I don't think I have to, because George Miller evidently saved himself from that career pathway by finally throwing together this film, Mad Max Fury Road. And I remember just being there in the theater. This is 2015. It feels like so long ago now.
Oh, yeah, same.
Over 7 years ago.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like that long ago. But this film, the second I saw the trailer, I knew it was going to be epic. And when I finally got to the theater to watch it, I felt like I needed like the roller coaster handlebars in front of me to properly experience this film, because it felt like a ride, just going on it from start to finish. Like, it was just so intense. And one thing that George does so cleverly, and people have talked about everything with this film, but it's so hard not to gush about it. I think what he does so successfully in capturing these action sequences is that he keeps the framing rather simple or easy to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything that the main focal point of what you're supposed to pay attention to in each shot is either dead center, or if it is to right, it travels or moves across in a very linear, clear fashion, which is very much antithetical to whatever the fuck Michael Bay does with his action sequences, because he just kind of films it from every angle that looks right, and then when it comes to sequencing it all together, it just becomes an absolute mental clusterfuck, and you just stop caring partway through the movie, which isn't the effect you want to have. But I don't think Michael Bay really cares too much about his audience. He seems to look down upon them pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
and this is why we've had like 5 or 6 Transformers movies, however many there are. I stopped watching after the first one, and nothing has convinced me to take a look at the other ones.
You saved
And
yourself.
seeing this film shows that these type of over-the-top layered action sequences can be done so well when they're done practically with so much coordinated effort. And if you keep the framing rather simple throughout it, because that's what keeps the chaos um, controlled. That's what keeps the chaos like manageable, is when you just keep that framing and composition so simple. Sorry, I'm getting into a rant. This film is amazing, and there's so much to get into it. And I remember when I was watching it, people were just talking about the action and just focusing on these other things. But what was really grabbing me on top of all that was how it was telling a story, where it didn't give you a huge exposition jump into the world you're in.
Nope.
These people are all just in it and they know what's going on, but you just get these little hints in the dialogue that keep you interested and invested in what's going on. And I love the way that they kind of infer the world building without telling you outright, and you're just sort of along for the journey. And I remember at the time, almost immediately after I watched it, I was looking for other people that talked about that, and that's when I had found this other podcast that unfortunately is no longer running, called All Walks of Film, which was hosted by a friend of mine, Red Mulligan, who I befriended through that podcast. And we have him on the server sometimes. He appeared on one episode we did. Shit, was it 2 years ago now?
Yeah.
We did like a whole war episode, and he was on there, and it was awesome. I love to have him
thank you
on
for
again.
that.
But it was Ren and his discussion that he had with a friend of his about that film, that they were the first people that really got into the narrative stuff about this film, that makes it significant beyond the action, and why it's held up as one of the best films even to this day. I don't even think I talked about the plot. I'm just gushing about the movie
Hey,
and
that's
its
fine.
reputation. But I mean, it's a very simple plot. You have Furiosa, played by the amazing Charlize Theron, and she is basically, instead of going to Gastown to get more gas, she is wanting to go to the Green Place and to rescue the wives of um, the terrifying baddie. What's his name in this? Immortan Joe.
Joe.
Who basically treats them like property. They all keep them locked in a vault like they're precious gold or something.
Yeah.
Like, this is a very misogynistic society, and really people are just used as resources, and they're exploited for
not
as
just the women,
rather
but the
than
men
people.
and the children too.
Children too. Exactly. It's misogynistic. It's misandric.
No, there's
just
no
bad.
bias. It's just everyone's treated equally like shit.
Exactly. Yeah. The war boys are
it's a
treated
very
as
fair
cannon.
society.
The war boys are treated as cannon fodder. The women are treated as milkers and breeders.
While men are also treated like blood bags.
Oh, and blood bags, which, man, I love how they establish him being a universal donor and how that comes up later in the film.
He's a raging feral.
There's so much great use of setup and payoff in this film.
Yes.
And that's what also keeps the action so cohesive and rewarding, because these little seemingly inconsequential actions that happen all tie into the narrative, ties into the visual storytelling. From the simple act of losing a boot can say so much about a character's relationship with another character when he returns it. And they barely exchange a word, but they come to a mutual understanding over a boot. And man, I don't know. I don't even know where to begin with this film. I'm just kind of all over the place.
Yeah,
today,
but this is probably my favorite action movie.
At some point, before I forget, I do want to get into the War Boys and that whole kind of pseudo-religious cult that they have.
All right, they are.
That's the powerful stuff. That's some powerful stuff.
You missed it.
All right, what?
They are. Finish my sentence. War boys. Crazy war boys. You fucked it up. Never mind. It's not fun anymore.
I don't get the reference.
Yeah. We are war boys. War boys. Come on, crazy war boys. I just love that opening chant. That's the most Warhammer 40k scene in this. Just like a bunch of crazed lunatics chanting. It's like, we are going to Gastown. Gonna fill up more smoke. And also, like, what a fun way to do exposition, to just make this like a daily chant that these crazed lunatics have to go through. Yeah, this is my favorite action movie ever made. Like, it's a tough. It's always a toss up between Mad Max Fury Road and a few other movies for like my favorite action movie. It's always like a tough fight between this, Casino Royale, and Aliens for me for my favorite action movie. But this, like, almost every time I watch it, I'm just like, nah, this is the best one. Argument's over. This is the best one. So many effective planting and payoff, like you said. It's not boring. Like, somehow a film with this much action and just non-stop thrills is not boring. I think a big part of that is that there's a lot of action, but there's variety to the action scenes. Like, there's an action scene when they're escaping the mud, and it's more about like building like Hitchcockian tension than like an outright intense chase. There's a chase scene for the bike, where the bikers are chasing after them. That kind of has more of like an emotional arc to it, where one character is like fighting pregnancy and there's a tragic death. So it's more of like an emotional high of the movie, and it also reflects like the character arc between Max Furiosa perfectly when they're finally working together. Every action scene has like a different purpose and different atmosphere and a different tone to it. I think that's why like the film never feels boring, despite the fact that it's just action after action after action.
Yeah, because like when we heard about when people were talking about this film before it was released, that basically the entire film was one chase sequence, and I'm like, how can you pull that off and keep it interesting and keep the narrative like engaging throughout? Like how can that stop? How can you stop that being from just being so one note? And I think they pull that off brilliantly because there is such a dynamic story happening with all that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like yeah, it's the subtle ways in which they tell the story, and it's all visual, like setup, payoff. I can't even describe it with words.
Like,
It's
even
just
the
one of those
Mother's
things you
Milk
have to
comes
see.
back. Like, even Mother's Milk like comes back to play in a pretty funny scene where it's like, what is this? It's Mother's Milk, and he just bathes himself in it. But it's like, yeah, God, that's gross. But it's like so many like little clever buildups and payoffs. Like, even like the knife and the throttle stick that she pulls out. Like, if you just had that scene, it's just like, okay, that's kind of a dumb plot convenience. She just happens to have a knife in there. But because she checks the knife earlier and she lets it out later, it's like that knife is subtly in the audience's mind. Like, we don't really realize that's there, but it's just kind of in the thought process. And then when it comes, it's just like there's a payoff that clicks in and you didn't even know it. And that's like an important key element of making like any story exciting and interesting. And to do that in a largely visual action movie, no less, is even harder to pull off. And they just absolutely nailed it here.
And I cannot underestimate, or I cannot understate. Sorry, what's language is not working well for me today. I cannot understate just the size of the production and what went into it. They,
the
I
cars,
think, rented
man.
out like
the cars.
10 like Arri Alexa cameras, which are like these, high-end cinema cameras that every major film is shot with these days. I mean, there's Arri and there's Red, but they had like 10 Arri Alexas rented out when filming these chase sequences, which is nuts because most productions might have one, two, maybe three tops, and one of them would be like an Ari Mini on a Steadicam. They had 10 of them mounted up, and then dozens of crash cameras, which are all like sub $3,000 cameras that are rigged up to be, up to the image quality for the most part, technically, as the other cameras, and they would just use those as brief kind of coverage shots, basically. And it's insane the amount of hours and hours of footage they shot just from coverage of all these chase sequences and getting these stunts properly put
like the
together.
amount of like prep work that must went into it. Like, apparently the film was storyboarded before there was even a script, and you could tell because there's just so much attention to detail and the action scenes and every like emotion and visceral reaction. Like, it all feels incredibly purposeful, and it kind of like Aaron said, like, that's where the art house elements come in, where like it's this big budget, over the top schlocky movie, but every shot feels incredibly purposeful. Like, there's a reason for it being
you
there.
can tell that he had this shot sequence in mind for years, and he had worked out all these logistical problems way in advance, and that's what really helps, completely oil up a film like this, to use a very overt car metaphor. But I think just it makes it such a well-oiled machine when you have that preconceived so thoroughly in advance, and that visually it makes sense. And this is a film that feels so visceral and so visual in its presentation that you feel like you're there. You feel the dust and the dirt in your teeth, and the chrome icing cake spray that they used actually for that, which they don't really explain in the movie, but they establish like that's something that you kind of spray on when you feel like you're gonna do something heroic,
Incredible,
or
yeah.
you do like a kamikaze kind of death, which is yeah, and I like the fact that it's just cake batter or cake icing that they use
Yeah.
that they use for it, which is which is probably what it even actually is in the movie. I mean,
honestly, yeah, it could be.
or it could be chrome paint, which you definitely don't want to live after you ingest that.
Yeah, but
Or
I
put
mean,
your,
I think
or
that's
coat
kind
your
of what
teeth
they're
with it.
going for with that, is
But
that you're going to die anyways, so you might as well take this substance that makes you look cool, but you're not gonna live for very long.
Witness me.
Yeah,
yeah.
more soft.
No, yeah, and
it's like you don't
and
even know what you're saying.
How they all,
Yeah.
I like how they all judge the thing. Like the one guy was saying it's mediocre, and
Yeah.
that's like the worst possible.
And then
insight
they
you can
all
make.
say it. It's like, do you guys even
But
understand what he's saying? Like,
no, I think they get it. But no, another point I was going to make about the editing. Most movies might have a raw footage to finished cut ratio of 10-1, meaning for every hour of screen time, there's at least 10 hours of raw footage that's behind it, be it different takes, be it camera setups, and just all the work that goes into the production. That's for a normal movie, generally speaking.
Yeah.
There might be 10 hours of raw footage material. For this movie, 200.
Yeah, it's
hours.
insane. I think the total number was like something like 5,000 plus hours of footage.
and if you think George Miller is a nut for putting all this together, even crazier, but also really awesome, is the fact that he got his wife to edit it together.
Yeah.
She's a Hollywood editor. She's been working on stuff for a while, and I can't imagine just being her and just seeing all this crazy shit your husband kind of shot, and you have to kind of put it together. And she had one of the best like acceptance speeches that I've seen. Like she goes up on stage wearing sunglasses, looking like Bob Dylan, and just playing it off like cool. It's pretty badass. I'm not gonna lie.
Fuck yeah.
But no, I think that was a really cool working dynamic that they had. And he said that he had her edit it because she said if she had a guy editing it, it wouldn't have the same kind of sensibility. And I feel like that kind of tapers it, or it creates a balance to this film.
Mhm.
And I love some of the sequences that they throw in here where they use sound design and they use cutaways to emphasize the feeling of it. Like when you see Max waking up after the sandstorm has calmed down. He's like buried in the sand. It almost looks like a distant mountain at first, but you see that he wakes up and you have these like shots of lava bursting that really go with the feeling of what he's experiencing.
It's really
and
effective.
You have this high cut low pass filter on the sound, which is I think brings you right into kind of his head at that point before he takes the hook of the blood out, and he's able to, he's no longer feeding blood through this tube. It's almost like the guy that directed this was a former ER doctor, and he knows and he knows what the sensation of these things are, and you can tell that also informs a lot of the blood bag and the treatment stuff in this as well. Like he understands that on a physiological level,
and that's a nice
practical
attention
level,
to detail. Yeah,
and it's brilliantly presented here.
And there's a specific scene within Herod. So originally in the script, like Herod was gonna climb back onto the war rig, and she would die a different way. But George Miller looked at that and said, "Yeah, no. Like listen, I've been in ER rooms before, and let's just say there's a reason you wear slip-resistant shoes. She's not gonna get on that hunky-dory." So he actually, on the spot, came up with the idea of her slipping to her death, because he knows that blood is like incredibly slippery surface that you wouldn't just be able to climb on normally, and I appreciate that. Any other movie would just bullshit around that and find like a stupid way to, and I kind of like how they build up the fake out death, where it's like, okay, she had a fake out death, it's fine, she's gonna be perfectly normal, and then she just slips off the at just the right moment. You're just like, holy shit, like that caught me off
Yeah,
guard.
no,
Like that's perfectly done.
it's devastating, but it absolutely makes sense, right? Like it makes
Yeah,
a
it
tragic
makes
amount of
logical
sense and
sense.
context, and that's what also adds to the believability of this film, and really, it really makes us feel, make this world like feel lived in. I feel like the fact that he had this film on the back burner for so long, and he was able to grow up and mature and really plan it out all these years, just made the film better. Like if they had done this in the '90s sometime, it probably wouldn't have been nearly half as good as it was.
Yeah, I think because it's been in the oven for so long that it's kind of like Everything Ever All at Once. They had so much time to build on it and perfect it and get it as good as possible. You know, movies like Everything Ever All at Once, movies like Top Gun Maverick, like they're kind of lucky to be in the oven for so long because they could just mold it into something even better with the extra time they're given. I think that's how movies like this turn out so good. Aaron, you've been really quiet this whole time. What are your thoughts on Fury Road, Mad of the Max?
Okay. When I hear like best action movie of all time, movies that often come up to mind are Raiders of the Lost Ark, Die Hard, The Matrix, Terminator 2, Judgment Day,
Crouching Tiger.
Crouching Tiger, The
Which,
Dark Knight,
go.
Inception,
Mhm.
and Casino Royale. And Mad Max Fury Road deserves to be on top. Not
Yes.
only as one of the greatest action films ever made, but also as one of the greatest films ever made.
Yes. Absolutely.
Well,
And
I think this film absolutely shows just the power of visual storytelling, what you can accomplish with it, and also sound design. Like the sound
Yes.
design really does so much. I don't mean to cut you off, Aaron, but it did remind me of one thing. I remember around this time period, I was really getting into the medium of film, and I was looking at these films that were shot on film because I was becoming like this film purist. Like, man, the film medium's dying. No one appreciates it. All that crap. And um, I remember watching like Interstellar, and I thought that was a great film at the time. Watching it on 70 millimeter in IMAX, I'm like, man, the film is like the medium that we should be using to film everything. And then I saw this film and realized it was all digital. I'm like, man, it doesn't matter what you shoot it with. It's what you do with it that matters. And this film wouldn't have been possible without digital, uh, media. I think this, just for the scale and just the size of production that they were going for. I feel like you needed to shoot it with digital cameras.
Yeah, and the amount of coverage too.
Exactly. So anyway, Aaron, you were saying.
yeah, I would say that Mad Max Fury Road is like one of the greatest films ever made, and it's no wonder I consider it an all-time favorite.
Oh yeah, it just has so much rewatch value as well.
You can
Like,
watch it in any
you
mood.
you can always see something different in it when you watch it. It's got action, but it also has some very clear kind of setup and payoff, and it has great emotional moments. Like you really feel for, uh, these women and what they're going through, and what they're trying to escape from, and what they're trying to get to. Um, and Furiosa's kind of angst throughout the whole thing. I feel like they do such a good job with all of that.
Yeah, and all of the acting is really good as well. Like Hugh Burns, may rest in peace, is like great as this intimidating force. He played a villain in the first Mad Max, but nobody remembers him. Everybody remembers Morton Joe, and his lines are like kind of memed about, but they're still like pretty powerful. Like, "Do not become addicted to water. It will take hold of you, and you will resent its absence." I'm like, that's actually like a pretty powerful line about taking things for granted and knowing that there isn't. It establishes just how little there is left in the wasteland. It kind of adds to the stakes of the story, and
It
even
sounds
makes the
exactly
ending
like somebody who profits off of people's despair would say.
exactly like it makes perfect sense for that kind of character, but also makes the ending. I don't know. I thought the ending was a little open ended, like either or not that was going to last, or either or not it was just going to crumble and fall, just like Morton Joe's empire. And the way I saw it, at least, was that's exactly why Max left. Like, he's seen this kind of thing before. He's going to move on before it all kind of comes crumbling down. It was the best solution at the time, but it's not going to last. And I kind of like that such a big budget Hollywood movie does kind of have like a bittersweet feeling to it. I think that part adds to like watching any mood too. It's like you take the ending as a nihilistic, it's all gonna be fucked. We're only happy for now, or you take it as a happy ending. It's like, everybody made it. Furiosa's alive. You know, Max gives Furiosa a nod, which, by the way, these two never kiss, and they have way more sexual chemistry than the Anya Taylor-Joy and whoever Stellan Skarsgård and the Northman. They never kiss, but they have way more sexual tension than a lot of couples in movies.
Well,
Just want to say
I like
that.
how they just sort of cooperate and they help each other through this thing, and they don't feel the need to, necessarily form a relationship after that. Or maybe she felt that, but he, was already on to the next thing, whatever it is. Like he feels like he just has to move on.
I kind of got that vibe to it, and that too adds kind of a tragic vibe to the ending as well.
Oh yeah, it's a survival instinct that he has, right? Like I shouldn't get attached to things when things are good. I
gotta keep moving on, and that makes this character so relatable. Like this character has been through so much. I love how the trauma affects him at certain points of the story. Like he starts hallucinating when he's running away from all of the war boys. There's like flashes he's experiencing while he's fighting Furiosa, and again, it's all visual, and that builds like an emotional connection with the character. It's like this character has just been through so much, and you feel his pain, but not in a cheap melodramatic fashion where they just explain how they're feeling like a bad George Lucas movie. No, it's just all very genuine. You feel the emotion. It doesn't demand your sympathy.
No, and I feel like, you get where he's coming from without necessarily knowing where he's coming from. Like you just got that feeling of he's trying to run from something, or he's trying to, find himself amidst all this chaos somehow, and he's had some trouble before. I also like, just in general, about the Mad Max franchise is the story is never straight between any of them. Like you see in the first one, spoiler for the first Mad Max, he had a wife and he had a son, and they were both killed, and that's what sends him spiraling and, hunting down these people in this post-apocalyptic Australia, where he's, he was a cop and he was supposed to represent order, but he goes mad. And in this film and in the other films, like the story of his origin keeps changing ever so slightly. Like there isn't a continuity, but I feel like that's almost done on purpose, where he becomes more of like a mythological figure, where what you hear about him from other people or what he tells you is different. And he's trying to define himself, but he keeps changing details or keeps misremembering things. And I feels like that's how stories were written in the olden days, but also how it would be if in a scenario like this, where it's all hearsay from what people hear and pass on, and memory isn't perfect, and people retelling stories isn't perfect, so there's going to be differences. Like you see flashbacks of him possibly having a daughter, and that's never explained, but you get the emotional connection of him, feeling like he needs to save these people because of a past trauma, right? And I like that the details are never exact, they're never specific, but the feeling is still the same, and that it informs his character.
And I think that's why like the style over substance criticism just doesn't work for me, because you feel the emotions of these characters even if we don't go into high detail. It's like the details are missing, but the feelings are still there. And I think that's why like the style is in service of the substance and the other way around.
Exactly. I think it absolutely goes hand in hand, and well, it informs each other. Like the style of how this is captured absolutely informs the substance and vice versa. Like yeah.
And
it's so hard to talk about this film because it's so good.
It's Mad Max Fury Road. Like, what can we say about that billion people haven't said about already? Like, Nicholas Hoult gave a performance I didn't hate for once. This was before I saw The Favorite, of course, and like he's great in that too. But I love how he plays this hammy villain that has like a redemption arc that again makes sense and doesn't feel melodramatic or forced in any way. It makes perfect sense within the context of the narrative. The girls weren't annoying at all, and even when they were, it's like, okay, that's kind of the point. Like that's what they're supposed to overcome. And there's like a scene where like there's a buildup of one character being like, "Oh, we should just go back to them. We should just go back to them." And you think that's what's happening at the end of the movie, where it's like, "Rectus, take me," but then she ends up like helping other people. It's just kind of that aliens commander moment where he goes back to save the others, where she like is like, okay, you're finally like redeeming yourself. You're this annoying character, but there's a nice little subversive twist where that you're leading up to this moment, this payoff, and it's really satisfying to watch. Like even characters, even all the villains, they have so much personality. They're so much fun. Even when they don't have tons of depth, they're just chew up the scenery. The bullet farmer is fucking amazing. This sympathy of death scene when he goes blind and he carries the dual SMGs is so good. And it adds like a lot of tension because this guy clearly like sets up that he does not give a shit. Like he's firing wildly into the fog. His guy's like, oh, hey, one wanted wives, just probing. Like this guy does not give a shit. So it does add tension.
I like how they have all these like bizarre religious convictions, and it's like their own kind of wasteland.
It's their way of coping.
Creative religion. Yeah. It's their way of coping with this uncertain reality. They have to create a sense of certainty that they project themselves forward into, right? And it can lead them down some dark roads, as we see.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like I also like again the messages too. On top of that, if it was dealt in any different way, it would feel like really preachy, really forced, really melodramatic. But again, it's the execution of the story that makes the messages more potent. Again, you feel the emotions of the characters without being drowned in their sorrow. So like even like the messaging feels more potent.
Another one of my favorite like characters that you see literally just on screen once. They have no name and no identity or anything, but you just see them for a second. It's when it's nighttime and it's just moonlit, which they shot at day, by the way. It's classic day for night, but they made it look so good with the blue.
It's really convincing. Yeah.
You have the one character that's just going through this muddy part of the wasteland on stilts, and they have this like drapery on them, and it's just like, what kind of life does this person have? Like, it's so fascinating. Yeah. And that character is literally on screen for like not even 5 seconds, I think. And it just creates a whole world and place of existence for this one character, and I just keep thinking about that shot. Like, what's this guy's life like? Just walking around.
I know, like there's so many scenes where you're just like, what is that person's life? Like,
is he looking for something here? Is he just getting by and he's just noticing this war rig kind of driving by in the distance? Like, it's just such a mood and an atmosphere and an image. Like, there's so much you can get from just a single image that creates all these questions, and I love it. Every time I watch this film, I see something new where I appreciate something that I had seen before, but I didn't think too much about before. Like, what's the story behind that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and even the production design, like they went into great efforts of like telling a story through how the cars are designed, and that really shows. Like, I love how the war rig like has like all of the immortal skulls. It's their most prized possession, so the skulls are symbolic of their like most prized idols, so it's just encased with skulls on the rooftop. There's a skull on the wheel. I think there's a skull on the throttle stick, and like there's so much. Like every gun is placed in like a unique spot. Like they had to think about like, okay, where would the shotgun go? Where would be the best place for a rifle? Like, yeah, and that's a great way of kind of like showing like where all the guns were hidden. And I'd also like point out this is one of the only action movies where they count the ammo. One of the only ones.
Yes, and that comes up so well too. Like she says, we only have 4 shots for this bad boy.
So you shove them into the guy's eye. Which is
and and then he shoots off 2, and he says, "You only have 2 left," and then he trusts Furiosa with the last shot to blind that eventually blinds the guy.
Yeah.
My only nitpick with that scene is he should have put a finger in his ear or something to stop it from ringing. But
I mean, he's dealing with PTSD, so his ears are probably. It's implied that his ears are like ringing at several points, anyways. Like he clearly doesn't give a shit about that.
Oh yeah, it's probably the least of his concerns at that point. Like
exactly.
Trying to not move so that you can get the shot.
And many people were disappointed with the scene of him like going off to fight the tanks, and we don't see it. The fact that we don't see it makes it more badass. I'm sorry, but that makes it like really cool. It adds to that mythic vibe you kind of established earlier, and Tom Hardy is just so cool. Like I don't know what it is. He's just so cool to watch in a movie. Like he knows how to like move in a cool way. I love how he like throws the boot and he just like dumps the ammo belts on the ground. And I love how he's like, "You're bleeding. That's not his blood. Like, it's just like, what the fuck happened? Like, it adds like a cool sense of mystery to
Oh
what
yeah,
happened. Apparently,
I love how you just see
yeah,
the flash in the clouds as well, or in the
yeah,
sand.
and apparently that
And
was done because they wanted to shoot that scene, but they ran out of time, or they lost the footage or something like that, so they had to do like a clever workaround.
I think it adds so much more to it when you
Agreed.
have that more hidden. It makes for a more memorable scene, in my opinion, when you do it that way. Which I would love to, or you know, we talked about Dune at some point on this podcast before, but I'd love to see like the sandworms coming through the sand at nighttime, and there's like a static charge build up, and you just see flashes of lightning in like the mist of sand. I would love to see that in like Dune Part Two. I was disappointed that the sandworms weren't creating lightning in this new one. Minor
But
spoilers for
hey,
that for
that
Dune.
might come in part two. That might come in part two.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I want my
Yeah.
sandworms to be static electricity
I want to
going.
see how the fuck they're gonna ride sandworms in the second one. I'm like, how?
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, Dave Villeneuve's pretty good at like shooting things in a grounded way. How's that gonna work for riding sandworms?
That's a good question.
I am
We'll have to see.
excited to see how he takes that. And this
We'll
movie,
save
yeah,
our spoiler filled thoughts on that another day.
another day. Until then, this film, I there's nothing really wrong with it. Honestly, like there's nothing really wrong with it. I can't really think of any issues. Fuck it, it's a 10. I don't care. It's the best action
Dang.
movie ever made.
I
love
was
it.
gonna give it a 9.6 and thought you were gonna beat that, but man, yeah, fuck it, it's a 10.
Yeah, fuck.
10 out of 10.
10
out of 10.
10 out of 10. People say this is style over substance, and that's feminist propaganda. Look, we all respect different opinions around here, but you're wrong. Sorry. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
This movie is a masterpiece.
It's so good. Oh man, I want to watch it again right now. Like,
man, no, it's so rewatchable, and that's another almost underrated part of these type of movies is like how thoroughly engaging is it on a single watch, but also how many times you want to jump back into it. And you know, there are films that I think are masterpieces and they're brilliantly, beautifully made that I never want to watch again.
yeah.
You know, a classic example would be Requiem for a Dream, which I had to subject myself to watch like several times within the span of a month when writing an essay. I don't recommend that. Uh, I love the film Come and See, even though I've only seen it once, and I don't plan on revisiting that film anytime soon.
Oh yeah.
Shout out back to our podcast when we had Ren on the show. That's when we talked about Come and See. Uh, that's a film that I have to be emotionally and mentally prepared for stepping into. But this one, I can hop into any time. And if I'm in a bad mood, it's a great mood lifter. If I'm in a good mood, it just enhances it. This is such it. This is like right on the crux of like artistic film and popcorn film. It's perfectly balanced.
Exactly. It has something for everybody. God,
yeah.
man. Thank you so much, Aaron, for recommending this episode. These films were a blast to watch. I've had a really, really, really hard week. So thank you so much for lifting my spirits, man. You're the best.
Oh, you're
and thank you
welcome.
for hopping on board and joining us again.
I am so glad that I got an excuse to watch Mad Max Fury Road. Like, I just watched it last night, and I was like amazed by how it still holds up.
I mean,
oh man, the whole sandstorm sequence is still one of the best things committed to film. Once I saw that in the trailer, I knew this was going to be something special with all them driving into that giant sandstorm. And
the music
it's one
makes
of the most
that
beautiful
scene,
sequences
man.
committed to film. Like seeing that one like little warthog rig explode, and then all the guys in it just kind of get sucked up in this like tornado of fire. It's like, man, this film is so good.
The Doof Warrior.
Yeah. Oh man, we didn't even talk
we missed
about
the Doof Warrior. We missed the best boy.
Doof Warrior, the guitarist. So good. Man, the music was done by Junkie XL, and this was where I had first heard of him as a producer. Although this wasn't the first song of his I had heard. I think the first or remix that I've heard him ever do was "Little Less Conversation, Little More Action."
Oh yeah,
Please."
the
Like
iconic.
he did a remix of that Elvis Presley song and added like a more of a modern kind of dubstep beat to it, kind of thing, which was the only song that would play over the morning announcements at my school in like grade 11, and it was that song all year, which it's a good song, but it just became weird hearing it every single day. And every time I hear it now, I just get flashbacks to being in high school, and it's just like,
It becomes your favorite song.
But
no, it doesn't become your favorite song for much longer when you hear it over and over and over again.
Oh no, but I can never get tired of hearing the soundtrack for this. I mean, the drums and the guitar, which that guitar they built actually works, but it's terrible.
With
like in terms of playability,
yeah.
which looks about right. It sounds about right that it would be just like a really shitty, junky guitar just thrown together from random parts. But people have made crazier stuff. I've seen people make slide guitars out of shovels and other things. All you just need a thing that can support two ends of the string at an even tension that you can tune, and you have some way to pick up the sound. That's literally all you need. Like a guy literally took two pieces of wood and strings at the right tension, a pickup, and it sounded just like a regular guitar. Like there's nothing about the body or the wood that actually influences an electric guitar sound. Like really in a huge sense. Sorry, I'm a bit of a music nerd, but I love this stuff.
No,
And
we love
you can literally make it out of anything, which is great. Yeah, guitars are fun. I like them.
I do too.
I had one next to me earlier. I was gonna play one, but nope.
Yeah, I don't like drums though. They're rough and coarse, and they just get everywhere. Man, that's like 2 times I called the prequels. How about that?
Yeah.
Next week, we are sadly not talking about the Star Wars prequels. We're talking about the next episode choice, Gun Limbs, including Evil Dead 2, Guns Akimbo, and Planet Terror, which I've not seen, and I have very mixed opinions about seeing. So we will get into that next week. Thank you guys so much for listening, and as always,
witness us. You're supposed to say witness us.
Yeah,
next week.
Witness us this week.
It tied into the movie we were just talking about.
Witness us this week. Yeah, witness us this week. Find your own key, and fall in love with a robot, and stay healthy for the apocalypse, everybody. Have a great night, and I will see you later.